What's up everyone and welcome back to Reload Reacts episode 74. My name is Trey and today we are going to look through r/NuclearRevenge, the subreddit for those who take their revenge to the most extreme of lengths. This first post is by Big Bad Beef. My longtime boss betrayed me and screwed me over money he owed me, so I made sure he lost something worth 30x more that he dreamed about his whole life. Where to begin, huh? I suppose I should get back to when this whole sleigh ride began. I am an educated computer tech that had the misfortune of graduating right on the cusp of the 2008 financial crisis. Wow, what a place to begin. Before it was considered to be a vocation of the future, various businesses came to our school introducing themselves, offering scholarships for college if we signed an agreement to come work for them after we graduated that as well. After the crash, those promises were the first thing they cut. As a result of that, I couldn't afford college, which meant I had to find work, which was easier said than done. My late and mid 20s were a roller coaster of dead-end jobs where I worked, finally saved up money, got fired as a redundancy and had to spend those savings for living expenses while looking for my next SE job. Years went by, tech went on and I couldn't afford classes to keep up with it. So in my late 20s, I snapped. I've had enough, I needed a career change. I decided to go into my late father's footsteps and become a welder. It's as if fate intervened. A week before I made the inquiry about changing careers, a state-sponsored program came out that let me become one for free. After completing the welding courses, I was quickly offered a job as a field welder. We're literally talking about a matter of days here, a refreshing change of pace from before where it took months or more. This is where the subject of our story comes in. I'll call him Rat Boss, RB for short. RB ran a small field welding business with half a dozen man crew, travelling all over Europe doing field welding. He said he'd be taking me in, show me the ropes, teach me real welding. None of that schoolyard horse ass. And let me tell you, the first 6 years were amazing. Yes, there was hard work, dawn till dusk, 7 days a week, sometimes gone from home for over a month, but the travels, the adventure, and the camaraderie? We were complete strangers to each other in the start, but we became like brothers, sticking together through thick and thin. Thinking back on it, I miss those days even if they are behind me. And RB was, back at that time, the kind of boss that puts all other bosses to shame. I remember that one time, where he took out a loan with a large interest, just so that he could pay us our wages because he had an emergency expense that drained his bank account 2 weeks before a customer was due payment. He rather went into debt to pay us on time rather than to ask us if we could hang in there a couple weeks. But everything changed by year 7. At that time, most of the core crew had left, missing their families too much to keep going. So did RB. He set me up as a foreman while he found himself work back home. He sent people he interviewed over my way as I needed them. It didn't start off so bad at first, several jobs done successfully, but the people that worked with me, it just wasn't the same. They were all short-term workers, there to make a quick buck, settle some debts or gain some XP to find better paid work back home. But then the pandemic struck and I had to sit it out. It wasn't a big deal for me, since I was used to having cash reserves for rainy days from my teen years, but what came after is where things started to go seriously wrong. Nobody decent wanted to work abroad anymore, so the people that came to work with me were those that RB might have proverbially fished out of the sewers. Drunkards, thieves, drug addicts, destitutes, the kind with nothing to lose and no will to do a good job. It all went downhill rather quickly. As the foreman, I made sure the job got done regardless, and that the work was signed off, so the bill would get sent and wages paid. But there were constant incidents outside of work, incidents unique to the demographic that worked with me. To top it all off, wages started coming late, travel costs weren't being refunded, and RB started doing some creative accounting when it came to the differences between everyone's net and gross wages. It all came to a boiling point when I received a phone call at 3 AM on the night I was supposed to drive the boys back home in the morning. The customer called. One of the boys has been arrested for drunk and disorderly. He didn't have ID on him, only the workplace identity card, so they phoned our customer in the middle of the night to help identify the foreman of that arrival. So yeah, I got called to pick him up. I ate a lot of S that day. When I came back home, I had a good long sit down with RB, told him I was done with that BS and that it was time to settle accounts. He sort of half-heartedly apologised. He also admitted he was having problems with his wife, which co-ran the business, and was fighting with him over how the money was being spent. At that point, he owed me around a year's worth of travel expenses, and if you take into account that I travelled at least 2,000 miles monthly, that is a substantial sum of money. He apologetically asked me to wait a bit on that money because his wife is CBing him on any major expenditures. He also asked me to stay on for just a few months on minimum wage, just until he can put a decent crew together. The idiot that I was accepted his proposal. There was no reason not to trust him. After all, we've known each other for almost 7 years at the time. I didn't think it was unreasonable to give him time to fix this, but I did have one condition though. I needed half the money he owed me by the end of September, because I'm having some work done on my house. He said that it wouldn't be a problem this far in advance. I said okay, we have a deal, but I remained suspicious. A couple months went by. I worked for RB locally on minimum wage, except the problem is that even that wage came in late. My hackles were raised. I was concerned that I would have to postpone work on my house, work for which craftsmen are so hard to come by. You have to pay a deposit to prove you were serious about needing that work done. In the beginning of September, on the month his partial debt repayment was due, I confronted him again. He assured me that paying half what he owed me for travel costs wouldn't be a problem, and that he's got the cash ready. As we parted way and I went for home, he gave me the fakest smiles I've ever seen in my life. I stared him down. I gave him this kind of look that even a dumb A would recognize as having "I'm not fooling around anymore" written all over it. RB lost that fake smile of his almost immediately. I said goodbye, got into my car and drove home. That weekend, RB sent me a way message about how he's got a crew lined up and that he's going abroad to talk with a potential customer to get his foot back in the fieldwork door. Alarm bells started ringing instantly. He's going to avoid me for the date he was due to pay half his debt. He's going to screw me over. He was going to screw me over. Bastard, after everything we've been through together. At this point I decided, if the money doesn't come in due date, a 30-day resignation notice is going to wait for him when he gets back, filed on the exact date he was supposed to pay. But the thing is, when something has you this riled up, such as RB's probable betrayal, you kind of have a hard time focusing at work, so I slipped on a ramp. I didn't just sprain my ankle or tore a ligament, I downright destroyed it. About a week before his debt payment was due. We're talking about emergency surgery here, 2 weeks minimum at the hospital, and being unable to put proper weight on that foot for 6 months. What do you guys think happened to the money he promised to pay me? It didn't come! Big surprise! Not only that, even the wage didn't get wired that month. It gets even worse. While I was in the hospital heavily medicated, the work got done on my house. My mother, who had authorization to my accounts in cases of emergencies, used my savings to pay for the work done on my house, instead of cancelling, which means I had very little money left. She told me not to worry, I will still get paid sick leave. I wasn't so sure. The thing about sick leave in my country is, in case of a work-related injury, and a recovery period longer than a month, the employer is only required to pay the first month of sick leave. The rest is funded by the government, whereas the employer only pays for social security and taxes. Then the government wires the sick leave money to him for him to forward it to me. Which of course, didn't happen. Didn't receive a single cent from him since. So here I was, broken, crippled, bedridden, and unable to work. It gets worse. I ran out of money, just as I had the last installment of an outstanding debt to pay. Banks were calling me weekly. I had to cash in an investment to pay it off and to subsist while I recovered. An investment that would have yielded me a modest amount of passive income for the rest of my life. So I was resigned for revenge. He lied to me, hid from me, failed to pay me what was owed, stole from me and pocketed money that was meant for me by the government. He will cook in the fires of hell for what he's done. The revenge. Before I tell you what I did to him, I wish a little background about RB. He lives in a small apartment in our capital city, along with his wife and 2 children. The apartment is extremely small, so small in fact, that they all practically climb over the top of each other to pass each other by. But he did have a dream. He bought a plot of land where he was building a large house, so big in fact, that a single one of the rooms is going to be bigger than his whole previous apartment. Over the course of those 7 years, he slowly built it up brick by brick, and he was almost done when we still talked. He told me that he was at most 6 months away from moving in. The thing about me being his foreman is that it involves a lot of paperwork. Every decision, every purchase, every dirty little secret hidden away in the numbers, and I had it all. It was simply a matter of forwarding it all to the appropriate authorities, and as soon as I was able to walk, well, I wouldn't really say walk, more like dragged my recovering foot behind the other one while under the influence of hardcore painkillers, I went out to turn him into every government agency that had a shot at getting to him. The biggest hit came at the Labour Inspectorate. As the caseworker rummaged through the evidence I presented her, she mumbled to herself wide-eyed something along the lines of, "My God, he broke half the labour laws in our country." The aftermath. I live in what could be considered to be a second world country. Our government is slow and inefficient, but it does act when prompted. And when it did act on RB, his fall was like being hit in the face by the same meteor that killed the dinosaurs. His accounts were frozen, he was barred from travelling abroad, his business licenses were suspended, and he was required to dismiss all his current employees with severance money, which he didn't have. He filed for bankruptcy soon after. He was required to sell the house he dreamed about for his entire life to settle the fines. He is stuck now. Like I was. Even worse. He is trapped in that sardine can of his for an apartment, unable to work, unable to support his family, unable to pay the bills until the legal proceedings from the government finish. For what he did to me, I was able to stay afloat. But for what I did to him, he is done. Broken. Reduced to utter destitution. He called me when the government's gavel hit his face. I will spare you the exact dialogue that took place because this post is already long enough, but to sum it up, he yelled over the phone, saying how could I do this to him, and yelled curse words at me. In return, I called him out for lying to me about money after 7 years, leaving me to rot in a hospital penniless. And I called him a rat that betrayed his friend, and to never call me again because, as we are now in a legal dispute, he should forward all communication through the case office of the Labour Inspectorate, and hung up. I made a claim on his bankruptcy proceedings. By the time he paid all the fines, all I was able to claim from him was a single month's worth of sick leave. No travel costs, no nothing else. But it's okay, I can live with that, as long as he got 10 times over the grievance he inflicted on me. No eye for an eye, no tooth for a tooth. The whole face for an eye. The whole head for a tooth. I stand, both literally and figuratively, but RB's deep in the dirt, that when he used to dream about his big house, now dreams about how he will someday, maybe, just maybe, be able to crawl all the way up to rock bottom and start all over again. Addendum. If you've read this far, thank you. I found it unusually easy to spill out a significant part of my life story to complete strangers, which took me all afternoon to put down into writing. Maybe because this story ended 2 years ago and my anger and resentment has long since subsided. I do not claim any moral high ground here, and if you call my story a clash of two villains where I emerged on top, that's okay, as long as you acknowledge that the proverbial gutter is full of men that walked away as they said they were the better man. As the comment says here, shame you didn't get all your money owed back. Hope you're doing better now at least. I'm doing fine, got a house, a car, and no debt. You living positively and healthy? That's the best revenge. This next post is a quiet borderline. What happens when neighborhood punks decide to beat up a veteran's son? Dad and George grew up in a booming city in what's now known as the Rust Belt. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the major car plant in town. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the plant in town as soon as you got out of high school. George was one of those people. Dad wasn't. Dad accepted a scholarship to his dream school to study engineering. During the weekends and holidays, he'd come home and hang out with his buddies, including George. One afternoon, Dad gets a call from Grandma. George had been jumped after work and had the metaphorical tar beaten out of him. For a while, it looked like he wasn't going to make it, but by some miracle, George pulled through. But he was just in such bad shape that he had to retire early and go on disability. While on one of his visits home, George's dad Walter pulls Dad aside and asks him if he knows a guy named Flynn. Dad had heard the name was one of the local troublemakers. He asked Walter why, and Walter revealed that the wallet had been found by George's body and given to him. The paramedics thought the wallet was George's. No, I have no idea why they didn't check on it. Unfortunately, the city was going through financial difficulties thanks to corruption and mismanagement, to the point that they didn't have enough money to pay their police officers during the weekends. No, I'm not kidding. From 8 PM Friday night to 6 AM Monday morning, there wasn't a single police officer on duty. Since the assault took place on Friday night, there wasn't much anyone could do. Dad asked Walter what he was going to do about it. Walter looked at him with a stern face and said, "I take care of my own." Walter was an army vet who had served during World War II and Korea. He never spoke about his time, claiming he was a radio technician and never left the base. He never breathed a word to anyone, even George's mother, his wife. The full story never came out until after George's death, when a letter Walter had written before his death was found in George's possessions. After realizing that Flynn was one of the people who had destroyed George's life, Walter got in touch with his friends. He was a personable guy, you know, the kind of guy who makes friends in 5 minutes. They all agreed that something had to be done, and thus Operation George's Revenge was born. Walter and his friends began observation of Flynn and would keep tabs on him. It took several weeks, but eventually Flynn and his buddies, Mac and Zeno, were overheard bragging about the attack. Knowing who to attack, they moved to the next steps. Walter's friends, some of whom worked in high places, decided to make some phone calls to their friends in the plant where all three worked. See, these friends were union, State was closed shop at the time, and disgusted about what happened to George, they decided to make things difficult for them. They'd remove vital tools for emergency maintenance at the last minute, put them in positions they weren't good in, and rearrange the schedule so they got the worst shifts to name a few. They also began a whispering campaign so everyone at the plant knew what had happened. In the city back then, who you knew and what everyone thought you've done was enough to make or break you. The goal was to get them to quit, and after a year or so, all three had quit, frustrated with how they were being treated. But Walter and his friends aren't done. Not by a long shot. A few phone calls and anonymous letters later, Flynn, Mac and Zeno were unemployable in the district. Because they hadn't been fired, they weren't entitled to severance or anything. Soon their money ran out, but they couldn't get out of town because everyone knew from the whispering campaign what they had done to George. For the rest of their lives, Walter and his friends kept an eye on Flynn, Mac and Zeno. Just when it appeared that they had an out, the whisper/letter campaign would start again and they'd be denied an out. The three men ended up homeless and destitute alcoholics who couldn't even get state aid. And this is in a state that is known for its generous aid for those in bad straits. Walter and his friends made a contingency plan to continue this until the three men had passed, using the next generation, so those men would never forget what they did to George. Nobody was able to find out anything about Flynn, Mac and Zeno, but I wouldn't be surprised that they're all still stuck and miserable. Wow, well, they kind of made someone pass away, you know, so I don't know, that one's a bit of a grey area, but you know, NuclearRevenge definitely fits the subreddit, that's for sure. This next post is by a deleted user. Never mess with my family. My dad told me this story today over lunch, and it seemed completely appropriate with this subreddit. There are two things to know before I tell this story. These events took place in the 1970s in a third world country where justice is obtained with one's own hand and family, for better or worse, is unconditional. My maternal family, on my grandmother's side, is known in her town for having outbursts of anger, the kind that blurs vision and turns everything red, and a strong temper. No one in my family embodied these qualities more infamously than my great-grandmother, Mama Delia. Mama Delia was an implacable woman, violent with her words and her fists as well. With my great-grandmother, my grandmother, her siblings, and later my father's generation, making a mistake, no matter how small, was a death sentence. My great-grandmother was married to my great-grandfather, obviously, a magistrate of the Supreme Court of Justice of my country and, according to my father, a good man and highly respected by all. But the moment that he walked through the door of the house, his authority ended and my great-grandmother's tyrannical rule began. Nothing was done or undone without her will, and as you can imagine, my grandmother and her siblings resented her greatly. Mama Delia has been dead for 40 years now, but stories of her are still told at all family gatherings. They also say that everyone in my family, my grandmother, who if you knew her you would say I'm lying, she is a sweetheart, and her children inherited a caloric gene that comes out from time to time in an explosive and memorable way. My great-grandparents had 4 sons, but only one is relevant in this story, Jose, not his real name. Jose was the second and the most rebellious of them all, the one who could not stand Mama Delia's mistreatment, and he let her know it all the time. He was the only one who stood up to her, and consequently, the one who suffered the most. It was when Jose turned 15 that he decided never again to let himself be mistreated or abused by her. And of course, Mama Delia had something to say about it. I don't know exactly the details, but something my uncle did that upset her deeply. Years before, Mama Delia would have responded with leashes and screaming, but since my uncle was already 15, he was taller and stronger than her mother, she had to resort to an alternative tactic. She decided to call a policeman to the house. And what were her instructions to the policeman? To give my uncle the beating of his life. That was the last day my great uncle lived at his parents' house, but where I come from, family is the most important thing impossible to escape. Some people have a very twisted view of family. 4 years later, my great-grandparents had moved to their new house in another part of town. Next to them lived the Cordobes. The parents normal people, but the son, Ruben, was another story. Ruben was about 25 years old. Ruben did not study, nor did he work or helped with household chores. I don't know this for a fact, but I can imagine it. Ruben spent all his time and energy on 2 things: growing his muscle mass until he looked like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, and insulting my grandparents every time he saw them walking down the street. My dad couldn't tell me why. Maybe Ruben was just like that, or maybe Mama Delia said something or did something to him at some point. I wouldn't be surprised either. What he did tell me was that Ruben's aggressiveness towards my great-grandparents was so extreme that he wouldn't even let them walk on his side of the sidewalk, claiming it was his. My great-grandparents never did anything about it. My great-grandfather had his first child at 46 and my mother at 36, so they were already old by then, and for some mysterious reason they never told anyone what was going on with Ruben either. This is where Jose comes in again. His relationship with his mother was strained and conflicted, which did not stop him from visiting them every so often to see his father and 3 siblings. That day, my great-grandparents were returning home, and of course Ruben's shouts, insults and obscene rudeness were there to accompany them as they opened the door to their house. What he didn't count on was that Jose was arriving at the same moment and heard everything. The world went first black and then red. Like a worthy son of Mama Delia, Jose exploded. He lunged at Ruben 3 times, all 3 times with a blow to the face. Ruben knocked him effortlessly to the ground. Faced with such a beat, anyone else would have abandoned the fight. Jose did not. Jose was used to the pain, the blood and the bruises that remained weeks later. Jose had lost his fear of confrontation years ago. He stood up one last time under Ruben's insults and taunts and charged him. I don't know how he did it. Perhaps Ruben had let his guard down, but he managed to land a kick on his opponent's shin. Ruben did not fall to the ground completely, but he was destabilized. Ruben did not know it, but he had already lost. My great uncle climbed on his back as if riding a mad bull at the fair, grabbed him by the head and slammed him repeatedly against the pavement. I don't think I can read the next line here, but I can read some parts of this. The story ends with Ruben in the hospital, his face unrecognizable and deformed, and my uncle disappearing for a week to avoid any kind of retaliation. Never again did my great-grandparents have problems with Ruben, although Jose's relationship with Mama Delia never improved despite what happened. I was kind of expecting the revenge to be towards Mama Delia, which seems to be what the comments thought as well, but I guess not. And that's gonna be it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stories in r/NuclearRevenge. Let me know what you'd like to listen to next in the comment section below, and also hit that subscribe button because I post new Reddit content every single day. There are 2 videos on the screen, one of which is for the most recent video, and another is for a video the YouTube algorithm thinks you'll want to watch next. My name's Trey, this was NuclearRevenge, and I will see you in the next video.